welcome back. This is Hey America, a song for David. Send me the DVD, and I said there is good American out there that they sing the song. I appreciate you, David, and keep making this wonderful music. We are here with somebody, he doesn't like violence. He's a non-violence. He's the director of non-violence organization, the founder of it, Mel Duncan, and he's coming here to talk us about peace and all this project that you have all over the world. Welcome to BelAhdan, Mel.
Eid Mubarak.
People don't say Eid Mubarak anymore.
Why not?
Husni Mubarak. They say Eid Saeed, but welcome. Thank you anyway.
Happy Eid.
Happy Eid. Yes, that'll do.
All right.
We know each other for a long time. You guys doing a wonderful job all over the world, and you just came back from a trip from
Qatar.
And tell us a little bit about your foundation. What do you actually do? I know.
Nonviolent Peace Force provides teams of trained unarmed civilians who are invited by local groups into areas of violent conflict. And while we're there, we protect civilians and do violence prevention. So we have teams right now that are active in the Mindanao region of the Philippines, another team that is in Sri Lanka, and then our newest team is in southern Sudan, where they've been deployed in anticipation of the referendum for independence that comes up in January.
So defending those guys and talking peace may be different from one country to another.
Of course.
Based on the culture and how they look at peace and how you defend peace.
Of course.
So you've been in Sudan, you've been in Africa, you've been in the Arab world. What are all the things you're looking for when you try to establish this foundation of peace in that particular hostile area?
You know, in the most hostile areas in the world, there are still a strong...
That's New York now.
Yes, right. But even there...
Shouldn't some people there
yes.
for peace violence?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even there is a core of people in the most violent places in the world today who are committed and putting their lives on the line for peace and reconciliation. And that's happening throughout the world. And more often than not, cross-culturally, that's being led by women.
By women?
Yes.
What is it about men that loves violence?
You know, we could get into...
I know this is another show.
Yes.
But, you know, when you recruit men for this, you know, why is it easier to recruit women?
Not necessarily easier to recruit women. What we find with our international peacekeeping teams is they're about 50-50, half men, half women. Mm-hmm. But what we find on the ground...
I see.
Is, first of all, there's committed peacekeepers and peacemakers from those areas that are doing courageous and creative work every day. And more often than not, that effort's being led by women. Amazing. So, for example, women leading delegations of people to return child soldiers, to go to the camps and get child soldiers back, is one example of the initiatives that women take.
And it's interesting, you know, when you look at history and war, you know, it's all led by men. And I think it's time
usually.
Usually led by... You know, there's some wacky women out there, I'm not going to say. You know, any work in the Arab country besides Sudan?
You just no, but we...
They're very hostile.
Well, recently, our country director in Mindanao, who is a Muslim from Pakistan, who's been a guest on this show.
Huh?
Atif, yes. Yeah. He was invited by the Organization of Islamic Conference, by the OIC, and he spent 5 days in Jeddah doing training and briefings with the leadership at the OIC on nonviolence and nonviolent peacekeeping. So this is an idea that clearly is understood in the Muslim world, because there is a strong peace and nonviolence tradition that is in the Muslim world.
Islam, Muslim,
of course,
peace. But you know, there's not a lot of money to be made in making peace and making war. So how do you finance? How you get all that?
About 50% of our money comes from individual donors. Another 40% or so comes from various governments, the Germans, the Norwegians, the Dutch, the Canadians, the Catalonians.
Americans?
No, the United States isn't ready for that yet.
Are you serious?
But will be someday.
Why is that?
Will be someday. Well, unfortunately, there's still a adherence to violence.
You
And
mean
one of the interesting things, Ahmed, is that when nonviolence doesn't work once, people go back to violence, which has never worked. It has never worked over the long term.
A lot of violence did not work. We don't resort to nonviolence. I mean, never war worked. I mean, all the wars that the American launched did not work. Short of World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq,
That's right.
Somalia. I mean,
And what we're finding now is that there are effective ways that are being tested in the most violent places in the world of doing peacekeeping and civilian protection that doesn't involve guns. And furthermore, we're much cheaper. We're the fiscal conservatives.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to say American has a very violent history and a lot of violence,
Yes.
people are 50,000, 30,000 people died, gunshots and violence. But can we get your model then establish a non-violence peace project here in New York or maybe in Florida? Go talk to this guy.
Well, I
Pastor
think he's been
Jones.
talked to enough, frankly.
Yeah. But I think his mustache is not listening. But what I'm saying, we always focus on so-called third world country, Africa, whatever. But there is a lot of things that we could do here.
And there is some very interesting peacekeeping work that's being done in Chicago, that's being done in North Minneapolis.
Yes.
There are attempts and activities that are going on. And if they had 1/10 of the exposure in the media that this minister from Florida had, then people would start to change their perceptions.
What
and
a
they'd say,
wonderful point.
these things do work. But we fight for 30 seconds of media attention. It's much more news that nonviolent peacekeepers from around the world are saving lives than it is that a minister with 50 people in his congregation wants to do something.
I mean, we spend almost $500 billion on military that launch violence, whatever you can call it. How much we spent on peace? And
to put that number in perspective, if we spent what the world spends on the military in one day for nonviolent peacekeepers,
for a whole year,
we could field 50,000 nonviolent peacekeepers for a full year for what the world spends on the military in one day. 50,000 peacekeepers. That would make a big difference in a lot of places.
When you say you've been financed by those countries, Argentina, Germany, what is why all this country believes in your mission and what you're seeing? What's going on traditionally, historically, or this is just a fluke?
No, there is a growing number of countries that realize that peace does not come from the end of a gun, and that we are in serious trouble, and that we need to establish new ways of dealing with violent conflict, new ways to make war obsolete. And that's possible. That's within our spirits.
What drives you? Is this a spiritual religion or history, or are you just a different guy? What keeps you going every day and going places? Don't you get discouraged? People dying everywhere and violence everywhere, and you're going out there and trying. You never gives up.
Of course,
never
I get
give up.
discouraged.
So what keeps
I've
you
seen
going?
some incredibly brutal things, and at the same time, I have seen some amazing compassion in the midst of brutality that has prevailed. And it's that hope and that connection with people throughout the world who at this stage of our history are stepping forward and saying, we're going to change things. It's not so different than 150 years ago in this state where people came forward and in other states in this country and said, we're going to do away with slavery. Now people realize the peril that we're in, environmentally, developmentally, in terms of peace, and they're stepping forward. And it's time for all of us to step forward and say, we can do a better job at this.
Are we more